My name is Dave Stokes. I'm a community manager for MySQL products, which means Oracle sends me all over to talk about various Oracle and MySQL products, mainly MySQL products. What I'm talking about today is the community edition, unless I note otherwise. It's still free, still open source. Oracle's had control of MySQL for going on 8 years. MySQL itself is roughly 22 years old. Because I'm talking about a version of MySQL that actually is not for sale yet, even though it is open source, the lawyers want me to have this safe harbor agreement. Basically anything that doesn't have a sales price on it or a SKU assigned to it, take with a grain of salt. This is a cute sign I saw in Glasgow, Scotland. No, Edinburgh, Scotland. The American signs you've seen around here, no red turn, no light turn, no parking, da 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 da. They just put up a sign saying something that says change priorities ahead. The most Gentile warning that the traffic that you thought was two-way is now one-way that I ever saw. And what does that have to do with the rest of the presentation? Absolutely nothing. I just like the sign. So, 22 years old, Oracle's owners for 7 going on 8 years. MySQL 5.7 has been our most popular release ever. Part of that's because of the JSON data type. If you haven't heard, everything's going JSON, JSON, JSON. Those of you with gray hair might remember years ago when everything's going XML, XML. Those of you with really gray hair might remember when everything was going ASCII away from EBCDIC. Yay. Other thing we did with 5.7 was we really cranked down the security. In the past, you installed a fresh install of MySQL, you had anonymous accounts you didn't want. We usually wiped out your root password, we gave you a test database, we opened all these vectors for the script kiddies. We've also been cranking down on the cranking up the performance a lot. Now, something that we added with 5.7 that weren't part of the general release but were plugins to that release were the document store, which I'll talk to a little bit later, and group replication. Group replication is active master-master replication. We hope it's going to be the Galera killer. You have 7 or 8 masters, and you don't really care which one you're talking to. You just want to write to a master, make sure that all the other masters are updated, that the changes have been made, and your data is out there safe. When the masters goes away, you just want to know that the other masters will take over for it. Or if at Christmas time you have a rush, you want to put in extra servers, you can do that fairly easily. Oh, by the way, MySQL is hiring, so if you're looking for a job, let's talk after this. So the big question I get when I start talking about MySQL 8 is what happened to MySQL 6? What happened to MySQL 7? Well, back before Sun Microsystems bought MySQL, back when we thought we were going to do an IPO, we had a version called MySQL 6. And to be honest with you, it stank. It performed very, very poorly. Had a lot of neat features, but MySQL 6 was just horrible, kind of like what PHP 6 was. So the neat features were backported into MySQL 5.1, and the number 6 was kind of retired permanently. The cluster product has been using a 7-line for the past 4 or 5 years, and with the changes you're seeing coming up in the future slides, you'll see why we decided to jump from 5.7 to 8. Just talking about that.
Doing the Sun technique of taking the last digit and increasing that.
Yeah, Sun did a lot of weird things. Big change, data dictionary. When the founders started MySQL, they kept a lot of the metadata in little files. If you've ever gone to your MySQL installation and CD'd in the directory and take a look around, see .myds, MYIs, FRMs, all this other stuff. That's the metadata. If you have a database, why can't you keep the metadata in the database? So, yeah, so the idea is over the past several releases, we've been going in that way, and we finally got there with 8.0. So there's a lot of good to that. Now the system tables in the past, before 8, were in a non-transactional index sequential method file, which is not transactional. They can get locked up. A whole bunch of other nasty things can happen to you. So everything is now in a transactionable set of tables. The good news is you can have 1 million tables in a schema. The bad news is you can now have 1 million tables in a schema. This is one of those things where I figure it's a great step forward, and I know it's also going to bite someone in the butt very badly one of these days. Other big thing that we're doing, we finally got common table expressions and windowing functions. Those of you who are on bigger, badder databases probably love these. Now, the great thing about a windowing function is that you can do analytics on your data very easily. The key word is over. You figure something that you're going to iterate over. So here we're going to iterate over department ID, and for each department, get the name, department ID, salary, and the sum of the salary for each department. Doing that in regular SQL without that is a pain in the rear. Here's another example where we're working on a range interval. So if you need to know the sales by month or by quarter or by week, it knows what the previous week was and what the following week is, and it knows how to cut up your data for you. Makes it very easy. Common table expressions, or CTEs. What you're doing here is creating a temporary table, kind of like a view, and querying that. If you're used to writing subqueries in MySQL, this will make your life a lot easier. This example here, we basically create a temporary table called QN that has everything from my table. And the very dumb example here is we're selecting everything from that temporary table. Now, we also have recursive CTEs. This will allow you to do things like Fibonacci numbers. Here we're just summing from 1 to 10. So if you have data that's truly recursive, if you want to go through, it's out there. Optimizer and parser. This is the heart of the database. They're very hard to write. They're very hard to get right. One of the things in the past we've lied about was descending indexes. You declared an index as descending. We just read it backwards. But now with 8, we're going to have true descending indexes. Also, we have upgraded the output of the trace file, so you get a lot more information. I don't know how many of you actually trace down to that level. Most people kind of stop explaining and make sure the indexes are great. But if you need to dig down further, we're giving you a lot more information. Also, you can give optimizer hints. You can tell it, don't do batch key summaries here. Don't merge the range finds here. They're actually a directive you can give to make the optimizer better. A lot of databases you can lock down the query plan, which is how the optimizer plans to do the query. MySQL isn't like that. It wants to reevaluate it every time. The good news there is that as your data changes over time, you're not stuck with an old query plan and things don't crawl. The bad news is that every time it wants to optimize it. If you know what optimal is, you can lock it down here. We also have done a lot of good things with the sys variables. In the past, if you were working on a set of data and someone in a transaction had the same set of data and they were deleting records and updating records and doing all much other stuff, the optimizer wasn't smart enough to know that what they're doing was separate from what you were doing. And sometimes you'd suddenly start crawling and you had no idea why. Well, we're smart enough now where we're not going to do that. Also, big thing for those of you who just tend to write queries and not really worry about them too much, we have no wait and skip locked. Skip locked, basically you go out and grab some files and someone else already has them locked up. You don't wait around for them to finish it because that person might have gone off to lunch, might have gone home for the weekend, might have had an emergency, might have quit their job. And you're sitting there waiting for that stuff to come back and it's never coming back. Yeah, let's see. We also have no wait. So if you know that there's good data out there, but you don't want to wait for it to come back, you just tell your query, as soon as I can't get there, just come back. That's by putting no wait. Skip locked, if someone else has a certain set of records locked, you can get everything else but those locked records. Now something else we just announced is we have caps. University of Michigan has a very interesting computer science department that's working on a whole bunch of database algorithms. These papers are very easy to read for most, compared to a lot of computer science papers on schedulers. But the CATS algorithm is based on the idea that you have certain users that are doing big requests for information. And if you give them the last little thing that they need to finish what they're doing, give it to them and it makes everyone else go through the system faster. It works very interesting, and that is the smuggest looking cat I've ever seen, by the way. Roles. In the past, if you were working with 2 MySQL databases, one production, one development or test, you always had someone who couldn't run this one thing because they didn't have the right privileges. Well, with roles, you can define a privilege. Joe is an accountant. They have the accounting privileges. They can see the accounting files. They can't see the personnel files. Or Ben is a programmer working on the receivables, but you don't want him digging into the accounts payables because you don't want him in both sets of books. So what you do is set up roles that have permissions for one set of data versus another. Good news, Ben gets another job in another company. You hire Mary. Mary gets the same role as Ben has. It's much easier to transition her in there. You're not finding out that there's some permission or some grant or privilege that you did not give her earlier. The biggest change for most of you in MySQL 8 is that everything will be UTF-8 MB4. If you don't like that, it's easy enough to fix. In the past, 20 years ago when I started playing with MySQL, when I wanted extreme speed, I got rid of all the other character sets and collations and did Latin 1 because I was working in Texas. We didn't need umlauts or cedilles or all the other little accents. 20 years later, all these companies I'm talking to, they need all the character sets out there. Previously, UTF-MB4 for MySQL was actually UTF-8 MB3. But now we're giving you the extra 2 planes out there. We're giving you support for Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. Big problem, if you are a Latin 1 shop, you're going to go from 1 bit per character to 4 bit per character. Hopefully disk space is cheap enough now for you, so it won't be a pain in the butt. Also, MySQL is the only database that supports the GB 18030 character set. So if you're dealing with the Chinese government and doing stuff in Mandarin, we're your choice. Also, in the past, we had a character set and a collation for it. Actually, we gave you 2. One was case sensitive and one was case insensitive. So you could do lower and uppercase comparisons without having to do a whole bunch of other stuff. Well, also, we're going to give you collations that are accent sensitive and accent insensitive. Now, what's the real reason for all this? That we're doing this, a lot of the other databases are doing that, because everyone wants this little fellow in their database as part of their data. Invisible indexes. In the past, if you were using explain on a query and you had an index that you weren't sure was doing you any good, what you could do is wipe out that index, rerun explain, and realize that you really did need that index and go back and try to rebuild it. And it takes minutes, hours, weekends, weeks. Sometimes it never finishes. So as an invisible index, you do an alter index and you make it invisible to the optimizer. You can run your explain, check the query plan, and see if you really need this. So this is a valuable tool for those of you debugging your queries. Also, we're adding something called set persist. In cloud environments or environments where you have multiple DBAs and system administrators changing settings, it's easy to get lost. I made a change on Tuesday that ran pretty good. He made a change on Thursday, made it better. She made a change that did great things on Friday. Machine crashes over the weekend, you come back and the machine's crawling. I'm late coming in Monday. She makes her change. He makes a different change, and we're not sure what's going on. Well, now when you do set persist, it writes it out to a configuration file so that when the system reboots, it knows how to pull up the latest changes. And it also logs with the timestamp of the user who made the change. This is an example of set persist. Something else we realized is that it gets harder and harder as the software gets bigger and bigger to change the next release of MySQL. It's literally just too much to chew off in one bite. So what we're doing is we're adding a bunch of new features in via plugin. You really type install the plugin name, SO name, and then in quotes the name of the shared object file, and it's there. Now if you don't like a feature, you just uninstall that shared object. We're doing this with a lot of things you'll see coming up early next year, but the main two things right now are group replication and the document store. This makes it more, makes upgrades easier if you want new features. It's also making it easier for third-party vendors to write stuff for MySQL because they don't have to go in there and actually hit the main server code. Another big change is we're going from two-dimensional geometry to three. As you can see, we have this wonderful endorsement by the former governor of California. So now if you want, your world can be flat, officially, or you can have it in ellipsoidal, and the coordinates will now wrap around if you need them to. We work very hard with the boost.geometry folks and the open GID information folks. So if you're doing something with GIS information and we can't support it, please let me know. Our engineers are very, very hot to trot on this. Also, the geographic stuff is our one case where we use R trees instead of B trees, or actually B plus trees most of the case. Very interesting if you're into different groupings of data. JSON. With MySQL 5.7, we added a native JSON data type. So you have a JSON formatted, or JSON document formatted row where you store a gig of data. So that's 1 gig and 1 column of a row in a table. Very popular. We've had a lot of folks upgrade their instances of MySQL that probably never would have upgraded to get to this feature. It's very amazing, and we're getting a lot of great feedback. Now, one of the things we got was, gee, I'm pulling this stuff out of the JSON document and it has all these quotes over it. How do I get rid of it? Well, these 3 lines are all equivalent. If you're like most of us, you're just going to do the dash arrow arrow to the $sign that represents the current document and get down the piece of information you want. Or you could use either of these 2 variants. Also, we're giving you a JSON pretty function. JSON information entered by itself, pulled out of the database, kind of collapses in on itself. It's pretty nasty to look at. This will make it a little bit easier to read. We also have array aggregation. So if you have a bunch of information in JSON documents, you can aggregate them out as one response. We also do the same thing for JSON objects, making your life much easier. This is more esoteric. We can actually tell you how much data you're storing out there in your JSON document to see if you're coming up against the 1 gig limit. By the way, the 1 gig limit comes from the protocol. The protocol overhead says the max packet size or max payload size is 1 gigabyte. If you're playing with stuff in memory on the server, you can do with more than 1 gigabyte. When you go to write it out, it's going to have to be 1 gigabyte. So we can tell you how much you're using and how much you freed up when you're moving your documents around. We're also going to give you JSON table. This is in the labs release. If you want to try it out, it's at labs.mysql.com. What happens is you have all this JSON information, but you need to output it like a regular SQL table output. So what you have to do is you, from your JSON document, for each record, you say, hey, grab first name and force it into a varchar. Actually, that should just be varchar instead of varchar2. This is how the things you're going to format stuff. You can tell it if it's going to be integer, if it's going to be reals, whatever it's going to be. And the great thing about this is suddenly you have all this free-form JSON information that has a little bit more I can't remember the word, but it's a little bit, the standards are a little more enforced. So if your emails that your software can swallow are 32 characters long and the JSON stuff out there is 50, it will give you 32 characters of that data. So please go out and test today. It's available for just about every platform. Also, there are Docker containers out there. Now be careful, Docker has Docker official MySQL Docker containers, and MySQL has Oracle MySQL official MySQL containers. If you're looking for more details on the stuff I've been talking about, a colleague of mine has a site out there called the Unofficial MySQL Guide, which goes into better detail than I can in a simple 30, 40-minute talk. And that's a lot to go over in a short amount of time. Let me do a quick thing on group replication. Once again, this is multi-master active replication. Any of the masters fails, the other one knows how to take care for it. A new master comes in and gets fully qualified with the current set of data before it actually becomes a participating member in the group. Once again, this is all a plugin. Also, the document store. Now that we have a JSON data type, what we can do is, by using a new protocol and a new API called the XDev API, we can let you write to the database without having you know it's a database. So if you have programmers that don't know SQL or you don't want to write SQL, what you can do is install the plugin for the document store, and you're basically playing with a document database. Behind the scenes, abstracted away from you, all the SQL is done at another layer by the server. But all you're doing is writing code that looks like this. You don't have to embed that horrible ASCII string with the SQL statement in there. You're basically saying, connect me to the schema I want to talk to, get me to the document connection I want. I want to find in that connection any name that starts with S, and I only want to find one record. Boom. Now, a lot of folks hate writing SQL. It's a declarative language instead of what you're probably used to, and it screws up a lot of people. I clean up a lot of bad SQL code embedded in especially PHP programs. So hopefully, you'll find this a little bit easier to write. And with that, let me bring it to the Q&A section. By the way, my dog hates this picture. I think she looks pretty good in glasses, but oh well. If you want a copy of the slides, I'll send a link to the organizers, but it's go out to slideshare.net/David M. Stokes. I've been giving this talk in variants for quite a while now. If you need to get a hold of me at any time, email and my Twitter handle. Warning on the Twitter handle, if you go back through past Twitters, about 2 years ago, Nicole Kidman had a movie named Stoker, and I wanted the producers to buy my Twitter handle. You know, even a buck, I would have sold it to them, but no, they get out there and they get snarky with me, and I get snarky with them back. So if you go back 2 years, you find stuff about red hair and nudity. It's not me. So, and with that, any questions about MySQL, MySQL 8? Yes, sir.
There are a bunch of really interesting features. I'm curious to know to what degree will it be backwards compatible with existing schemas?
Some things will be backwards compatible. Some of the JSON functions will probably put back. The data dictionary, we can't port back to 5.7. It's a major change in course. Rules, I've seen some calls to have that put into 5.7, but I don't know if they're going to do that. At a certain point, it becomes how much legacy stuff do you want to keep fixing while you're trying to go that direction?
Sure. Well,
So,
what I mean is, like, could I just in place upgrade from 5.7 to 8?
the idea is,
Expect it to fade itself.
yeah, the idea is we're making it as easy as possible. Until 2 years ago, we never tested downgrading as part of our QA process because why would you ever want to downgrade?
Rollback.
Rollback, yeah. That was something that our QA department had thought about seriously. So we're trying to make upgrades as easy as possible and rollbacks as easy as possible. In the release notes, we do give warnings about things that change, like the UTF-8 MB4 thing. But for the most part, we try to make it as painless as possible. Anyone who went from the 5.0 to 5.1 upgrade, I'm still apologizing for that. 5.1 to 5.5 was much better. 5.5 to 5.6 was easy. 5.6 to 5.7 is boring. Hopefully 8 upgrade will be boring also. Yes, sir.
It's a Python conference. Tell us more about how MySQL works nicely with Python, and repeat the question.
Oh, how does MySQL work with Python? Believe it or not, we write a lot of our own code in Python. The MySQL utilities are entirely written in Python, and we give the code away free, and we ask people to extend it if they find something really nice, do that. In the past, the folks who ran PyPy didn't like our licensing on giving away our connector. Well, now they're happy with us. We do still have our own connector. The document store, gotta forgive me, I have a wonderful demo that runs on VirtualBox, but guess what happened to my VirtualBox image earlier? It bit the big one this morning. So, and this shell, if you're in anything else but Windows, is color-coded, does a whole bunch of other stuff. The new MySQL shell that runs on the new protocol and all that has 3 modes: JavaScript, traditional SQL, and Python. So we're embedding Python in our shell. Let's see. If I go out and log into the WorldX database, we have an oh, that's not showing up, is it? Damn it.
Hopefully change the space.
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm not sure how to get that to. Let's see if this pops up. There we go. So when you log in by default, it's in JavaScript mode /JS. There's an SQL mode for, just like the old shell, Python mode. Now I connected earlier to the WorldX database, and there's an object out there, WorldX. So from that object, I can get whichever collections are out there. And in this case, we have a, let's see. It helps if I could.
So we're just about out of time.
Okay. Anyway, see me later and I can show you this. But the idea is we're giving you the new shell with a built-in Python interpreter because we're trying to encourage more interaction in the Python world.
Python 2 or Python 3?
Right now this is Python 2, but we're working hard on 3.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff in 2 that's a lot safer for the general world, so.
Cool. Let's give Dave a round of applause.